Because to understand anything, you have to live with the times. The Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, once told his Hasidim, his disciples, he said, "Medarf leben mit der Zeit." He said in Yiddish, "Medarf leben mit der Zeit," which translates to, you have to live with the times. And here you have these, very mystical, very well-learned individuals who are thinking, what? We're supposed to adopt modern Russian, what was then a few hundred years ago, modern Russian culture? What does it mean to live with the times? What exactly does that mean? So later on it was explained, or shortly thereafter, shortly thereafter it was explained that what is the meaning of this living with the times? It means living with the Torah portion of the week, living with the time of the year of the Jewish calendar that we're in. In other words, living with the Jewish time. And so therefore I need to mention the following. Yesterday was Shabbat Mavarchim Chodesh Elul, which is the Shabbat that precedes and blesses and energizes the Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month of Elul. Now, this is not insignificant. In other words, let me say that in a positive way, this is very significant. Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul, is the 12th month of the year. It's the final month of the year, and it's the month before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right before the high holidays. And it's a month that we know to be the month of Cheshbon HaNefesh, the month of personal accounting, where we look at all of the things that we've done over the last year, and we think about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we can enhance, what we need to cut, what needs improvement, what needs tweaking, redirecting, etc. It's a time of year in which we're introspective and make good resolutions. We don't wait. This is the key idea. We don't wait for Rosh Hashanah to take a New Year's resolution. We start thinking about that in the 30 days preceding. We have a whole month to get things corrected, anything that needs to be corrected. We have an opportunity to get it corrected so that we go into the new year with confidence and with spiritual clarity and with intention and with presence. We have everything lined up and we know what we're doing. Now, look, are we ever going to really know everything that we're doing? We didn't know about any of this, right? This year. We've had a lot of surprises, but to the best of our ability, at least from within, to be as centered and as properly, aligned as we can as we head into this time of year. In Hasidic thought, in mystical thought, according to Kabbalah, the month of Elul is a time of Melech Basada, which means the king is in the field. And this is something that we've studied before in these classes, Kabbalah Coffee. We actually had a whole series exploring, a few years ago, we had a whole series exploring this idea of the king is in the field. I'll give you the short version because we did this over many weeks. But I just want to set the stage for our conversation today. That's just, if you're wondering what's going on, I want to set the stage for the time that we're in so that our studies will have that much more importance. So again, getting back to the king in the field, what this means is, so usually the king is in the palace. Now, if you want to visit the king, there's a lot of red tape. You know what I mean by red tape? There's a lot of protocol that you have to go through to meet the king. You have to know the right people. You have to make an appointment. Maybe it's an online appointment. I'm kidding, right? It's all this stuff, all these connections, all of these. There's a lot of different steps that need to be taken in order to actually have a chance to meet with the king. And even if you make all the moves, who said that it's actually going to happen? It's very difficult. And when you go to the king's palace, wow, you have to be dressed a certain way, and you have to look a certain way, and you have to act a certain way, and you have to speak a certain way. There's a lot of protocol and there are many strings attached to that experience. Conversely, imagine the king is not in the palace. Imagine the king goes on vacation or decides to go on a tour of the countryside. Yeah. Listen, if you were the king or the queen, right, wouldn't you from time to time want to, go out and roam the countryside and take a stroll and see what's going on out there? You would. I hate to put ideas in your head, but just work with me here. You would, right? Okay. So imagine the king is visiting. He's traveling. Maybe he went on vacation somewhere, whatever. He's traveling back to his palace. And he goes by, he's traveling the country roads, and he sees the farms and the farmers, and everyone who wants can come out to the road and wave and say hi to the king. Right? Because at this point, you don't have to go to the palace, and you don't need an appointment. On the contrary, this is like back in the day, the king is making a home visit, right? The king is in the field. That's the energy of the king in the field. The king in the field means that the king is accessible. The king is wearing maybe not all of the royal garments. In other words, not all of the pomp and circumstance, not all of the protocol, not all of the layers, the barriers that stand in between the every person and the king. Those barriers are somewhat removed, and the king is more accessible, and the king is probably in a better mood, right? And the king is greeting everyone. Besever panim yafais, as the mystical text goes, with a shining countenance. Umar lahem panim seichakes lekulam, and he shows them a smiling face. So he greets them with positivity and with a smile, and it's accessible. According to the mystics, according to Kabbalah, this is the exact energy of the month of Elul. Come the month of Tishrei, which is the next month, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you want to talk to God? Okay. Synagogue, shofar, fasting on Yom Kippur. There's a lot of protocol. It's very formal. That's a good word. It's very formal, the experience, come high holidays. But right now, in the 30 days preceding, so this Thursday and Friday is Rosh Chodesh, 2-day Rosh Chodesh. But come Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is this week, come the first day of Elul, suddenly it's available. God is available, and God is accessible. Without the formalities, you and I can have that connection. You and I can plug in like never before. Now, even though we had this opportunity last year, we know the mystics tell us every single year there's more light in the world, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like that. But that's only because as the light is increased, the other side also steps up its game. That's why it seems like there's more challenges than ever. There's more darkness. But according to Kabbalah, whenever you see more darkness, that's only a sign that the light is that much greater. So this year, even though we had Elul last year and the year before, we should never think of it as, just another high holiday season, just another Elul, just another opportunity for the king in the field. No, it's not just another. It's an opportunity that's never, on this level of light, of possibility, that's never existed. In the month of Elul, there are three primary, in general, this time of year, there are three primary focuses. And that is Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Torah study, we're meant to increase our Torah study. Tefillah, we're meant to increase our prayer. Now, by the way, increase could be quantity or quality or both. So it's either adding more time to your Torah study, adding more time to your prayer, daily prayer regimen. If you're doing 5 minutes a day, do 8 minutes a day. If you're doing 10 minutes a day, do 15 minutes. If you're doing 15, do 20, etc. If you're doing an hour, do an hour and 5 minutes. It's a little bit more. And or quality. In other words, add to your quality of Torah study. Go deeper. Study deeper ideas. Prayer. Have more concentration when you pray. And of course, the final pillar, which is a tremendously important pillar, is the idea of tzedakah, the idea of giving. The idea of giving is connected with this time of year. And in fact, I want to mention that my very good friend, Alex, who's on with us, Alex from Chile, Alex has been promoting for many years now Rosh Chodesh El to be Yom Tzedakah, a day of giving. And so in whatever context, this week, as we celebrate Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the month of Elul, it's a time for introspection, it's a time of connection, it's a time for Torah study, it's a time for prayer, and a time also to be generous and to give to those that are in need. And there's many needs out there today. Certainly there are many needs in our communities, there are many needs in the larger community. Wherever you're giving, to give is an incredible blessing. We had a class last week, our Torah studies, our Wednesday night class last week was all about the mitzvah of tzedakah, the mitzvah of giving. And one of the ideas that we said is the idea that tzedakah, tatzil mimavet, tzedakah has the power to save a person from, even if there's, God forbid, a negative decree on high, tzedakah, giving, has the power to avert the decree. I mentioned the famous story that the Talmud cites. The daughter of Rabbi Akiva, so she got married, and the morning after her wedding, she woke up, and the room was light. This is before indoor lighting. It was dark the night before, maybe some candles, whatever, but it was otherwise dark. The next morning, she looks behind her bed, and she sees that there's a dead snake. There's a snake that was impaled with a pin that she took out from her hair. She put in the wall behind her, and she had impaled a poisonous snake, basically saving her life. And this was like just an incredible, can you call it coincidence? Not a coincidence, but an incredible confluence of experiences where there was a rattlesnake or whatever, some poisonous snake, and she happened to put her pin in at the moment where the snake was in the position that it would get impaled, get killed by this pin. Rabbi Akiva heard about this story, and he asked his daughter, "Tell me, what happened at the wedding? Certainly you had some sort of zchut, some sort of merit by which your life was saved." And she said, "At my wedding last night, at the feast, at the meal, so I noticed that at the back of the room there was somebody that had come in, somebody who looked like a poor person, wasn't necessarily invited to the wedding, but stopped in, and didn't have a place, didn't have, I don't know if they had them then, but no name card. You get those name cards, the little, with your name on it, table number. Person didn't have one of those, didn't have a place to sit, didn't have a plate of food. So I took to him my own plate of food." She says she was the kala, the bride. She said, "I took quietly, I didn't tell anybody. I just took my plate of food and I gave it to him, and that's it. And we continued the celebration. Whatever I ate, I didn't eat. Doesn't matter." So he said, this is the meaning of the verse that says, or the meaning of the adage, the Jewish expression, tzedakah tatzil mimavet. Tzedakah saves from even a decree, God forbid, of death. So it's a time of year in which we heighten our spiritual connections on all three levels, both regarding our own development, which is Torah. Torah is our own development, our own understanding, adding to our own wisdom. Tefillah, our connection, prayer, connection with God. And tzedakah, which is our connection to our fellow human being. So on all three levels, we heighten it this time of year. We work on ourselves more, we work on our connection with God more, and we work on our connection and our love and our care for other human beings. This course, this text that we're studying, is all about this third pillar. The third pillar of Bein Adam Lechavero, the experience and the relationship between us and our fellow human being. This text, and I always love showing you the Hebrew, it's called Hecholtzu Ranat. That's the original title. Hecholtzu Ranat. It was taught in the year Tafresh Nun Tes, which corresponds to the year 1898 and 1899. That's when it was originally delivered, this mystical discourse, this mystical text. This text is all about developing a deeper connection, a stronger connection, a more intentional connection with others, with other people, with other human beings. And the premise is that the greatest damage that exists, the greatest harm that exists within the world is the harm that is the separation that we have between one person and the other person. And we have all sorts of reasons why. Yeah, we have all sorts of rationales and justifications why we don't get along with the other person, why we can't get along with the other person, why, if we're supposed to get along with the other person, well, then they should be the first one to make the move, and I'm going to wait until they do that, and then I'm going to do what I need to do. The bottom line is that we are meant to be connected with others and not disconnected. I'm always reminded of that picture that the astronauts took from outer space of planet Earth, where you see this vast darkness, and you see the pale. The picture, the photo is called the pale blue dot. You know that photo. You know we're on the computer right now. So what I could do is just quickly Google pale blue dot, and that's it. And we can pull it up. This is something that we can't always do in class in person, but this is something that we can certainly do now. So let's just bring up this picture, if I can find it. I don't know if I can find it. I'm going to open up a picture. I don't know if this is the original one or not, but it's okay. For me, it's okay because I love this picture. This is actually not the pale blue dot picture. This is Earthrise. But I love it because it just puts everything in perspective. And I think perspective is what we need. You see that picture? That picture is taken from the surface of the moon. Or actually not from the surface. There was a space mission that was hovering, orbiting, going past and above the surface of the moon. This is before the first moon landing. And I heard with my own ears an interview. Hold on one second. I heard an interview with the astronaut who took this picture. And he said something that moved me and that touched me so deeply. I just remember being just so shaken in a positive way by what he said. He said, here we were, I think there were 2 or 3 of them, I think 3 of them. Here we were, 3 individuals, people who had dreamed of going into outer space, people who had dreamed of exploring, people who dreamed of doing something to benefit their country, to benefit the world, whatever it is. And here they had finally arrived to the moon, which is like the holy grail of space travel. The holy grail of space travel. And we're going around the moon, and it's gray, and it's lifeless, and it's craters, and I'm going to paraphrase. He didn't say this word, but it was relatively plain and maybe even a little bit ugly. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I don't think he used the word ugly, but it's very, very plain. And he said, then we came around when they made that first cycle, that first cycle around the moon, and they saw the Earth emerge. This picture is called Earthrise, because as they came up, they saw the Earth. He said their breath was taken away. It was breathtaking, the view of Earth, to see the blue, to see the color, in contrast with all the gray and the black that they were looking at by the moon. To see the blue just come up, it took them. And again, I'm mixing astronauts and I'm mixing missions, but the idea of the pale blue dot is the idea that when we look at the world, when we look at planet Earth from a bigger vantage point, it becomes clear how small everything is and how we're literally all on the same planet together. And the notion that we were fighting and killing each other and harming each other and not talking to each other, not getting along, not understanding each other, when we're all sharing the same relatively small space is mind-boggling. But more than just mind-boggling, it should be encouragement to change the status quo. We should not be satisfied with the current tensions that exist in our own relationships, with the current disconnections, with the current friction that exists. We should see to it to do whatever it is in our power to heal the frictions. That is the theme of this text, Heicholzer. And that's the theme of the holidays, which is to get together, which is to connect with the other. It's to connect with oneself, it's to connect with God, and it's to connect with the other human being. And the 3 are inseparable. If you really want to know yourself, you have to know God. If you really want to know God, you have to know the other. And it doesn't necessarily only work in that order, it works on all 3 levels. There's an intertwined relationship between all 3 parts. Me, in other words, self, source, and other. All 3 are connected. And if we have a separation, as Kabbalah teaches, if there's a separation, if there's a breach between us and the other human being, that constitutes not just a breach between us and them, that constitutes a breach between us and ourselves. And that also constitutes a breach, a disconnection between us and God. It's not just me and Shmerel that have conflict. There's a disconnection, a break, but it's a break within my own self and a break within my relationship with God. It affects everything on all levels because it is ultimately connected. According to Kabbalah, we're all connected because we all share the same soul. So that means if I can't get along, if I'm not getting along with the other person, that means that I'm not getting along with a part of my own soul. It's like, imagine this. This is another example brought in Kabbalah. Imagine a person's limbs start fighting with each other. Imagine if, when your left hand drops something, your right hand seeks to take revenge against your left hand. Imagine how crazy, how much sugar that would be. Your own, so yeah, you're holding something and you drop it. Imagine your right hand says, "Oh, left hand, what are you, such a klutz?" and starts clobbering the left hand. It would be crazy. It would be crazy. Imagine if, when you were walking barefoot in your house, and you bumped your toe against the chair, against the table leg, against whatever, bedpost, whatever it is. Imagine if your hand started harming your foot, or imagine if you got angry at your foot. It doesn't make any sense. Because why doesn't it make any sense? Because it's all you. There's no difference between your right hand and left hand, between your hand or your head and your foot. It's all you. So you don't look at it as an outsider. You don't look at it as I don't even want to use this word, as an enemy. I don't even want to use that word. God forbid. We don't look at it as the other. We don't other our own body, because it's our own body. We don't judge it. We don't take retribution. It's not othered. But when it comes to somebody, another physical human being, we do other them. Why? Only because we're not in that moment, or in those moments, aware of the truth. And the truth is the ultimate truth. And this is stated clearly in Kabbalah. And if you want to know a source, if you want to know one of the most profound places where this is discussed, chapter 32 of the book of Tanya. The Lev, Lamed Bet, 32. The numerology of 32 is Lamed Bet, Lev. Lev means heart. The heart of Tanya says that what's the key to love the other person? It's to recognize the truth. And that is that although our bodies may divide us, our souls unite us. It's only the division, the only reason why we look at the person as an other. I was about to say the other person, but that's already othering them. The only reason why we look at someone and consider them to be an other, someone else, who we can then judge and dislike and condemn and all of that stuff. The only reason is because we've been convinced by our eyes that the physical reality is the only reality. It's because our eyes have fooled us into believing that the physical manifestation of reality is the be-all and end-all and the only thing that exists. And that's the greatest lie ever told. Because the physical is the least true. The spiritual is the truest. The physical is the least true. And on a spiritual level, there's no difference between my soul and their soul. Number one, we all come from the same source. And number two, we all share the same spiritual DNA. Number three, we're all parts of the same larger body, larger spiritual body. All souls are part of the larger spiritual body, sharing the same source. One is a head, and one is a hand, and one is a foot, and one is a this, and one is a that. Everyone's got their own mission, their own personality. And that's okay. And so here's the question. Do I look at myself and define everyone else by me and by my physical identity? So I look at myself as a physical creature, and then I define everyone else by that measure, and I say, if you don't look like me, talk like me, speak like me, etc., then that's it. If you disagree with me, then you're out. Or do we have the courage, the spiritual courage, to be a warrior, to be a spiritual warrior, and say, I look beneath the surface. I choose not to be convinced by the most external layer of reality. I choose to look inside, to look a little bit deeper, and on a deeper level I know, and I can see that that person also has a soul, has a neshama. That person has a spark of God, and that spark of God is identical with mine on one level, is complementary with mine on another level. So there is distinction, but the distinction is intentional. And the greatest way that I can be, the truest way that I can be, is at peace with the other person. My belief is we're going to get there. My understanding is, rumor has it that we're not yet there 100%. But I am confident, because revolutions happen with individuals. How does something change? One individual at a time. They tell a story, a beautiful story. There was once a father who was very busy. He was working on doing some work in his office, in his home office. And his son, his young child, comes in, and he says, he starts engaging in the conversation. The father says, I need another half hour. I have some work to do. The child was clearly looking for something to do. The child didn't have any activities to do at that point. So the father took there was like a magazine cover. He had like a magazine in his office, and on the cover of the magazine was a picture of the world, and with all the countries, and a very detailed map of planet Earth. So what he does is he rips off the cover, and he takes his scissors, or maybe even with his takes his scissors, I guess, and he cuts up the picture of the world into a bunch of different pieces, and he says to his son, here's a puzzle, because he knows his son likes puzzles. So he gives him the puzzle pieces, and he says, put it together. He figures it's going to take him a little while because it's so detailed. There's oceans and land masses and continents. His son is still young, he knows a little bit of the map, but it's going to take him a little while to piece it together. He figures it's a good half hour, at least a half hour activity, and his son will be happy. He'll be able to get his work done, then they can schmooze. A few minutes later, the son comes back and he says, I'm finished. The father says, what do you say? It's not possible. What do you mean? How you finished? He says, it was easy. I finished it 1, 2, 3. He says, let me see. He leaves the office, goes to the other room where the child had taken the puzzle pieces, and he sees the finished puzzle, and it's taped together, and he says, how'd you do it? I can't imagine how you could possibly have done it so quickly. Did somebody help you? He says, no. It was very simple. You see, on the other side of the picture of the world was a face. Sometimes in magazines you have advertisements, so the cover has one thing, but you turn the page, on the other side of the page there was a picture of a face. So he said, I didn't know how to put together the other side, but I flipped each piece over, and to put together a face, that's very easy. I put the face together, I taped it up, flipped it over, the puzzle's done. It's a cute story, but more than a cute story, it tells us the secret, the greatest secret of all. And that is, to fix the world, you fix the individual. To put together all the broken pieces of our planet is first to put together the broken pieces of one person. And I don't want to be, my intention is not to speak harshly or negatively. On the contrary, I want to speak positively. So I'm not saying broken as a judgment, but what I'm saying is each of us has areas in our lives that can be healed or can be improved. If we want to change the world, sometimes we think we need a revolutionary. We need a Messiah. We do need Mashiach, by the way. But sometimes we think that the revolutions are going to happen by, some dramatic and drastic occurrence. The reality is, Kabbalah tells us, you want to create a revolution, it starts with you. If I want to create a revolution, it starts with me. In other words, it starts with us as individuals. That means to heal our own relationships, to heal our own frictions, to heal our own faribbles, their own little tensions that we have with other people. That's how we heal our planet. So you look at the world and you say, well, there's such intractable hate and such intractable, such tension, such dissonance, such disconnection. This is not going to get solved anytime soon. That's number one. It's a defeatist attitude, and number two, it's not true, because healing begins with one, that becomes two, that becomes three, that becomes four, etc. Things are healed one person at a time. That's how it works. The excuse that we tell ourselves is, what can I do? Suddenly we become very humble. What can one person do? That's a tactic, says Kabbalah, of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, who makes us feel small so that we don't change the world, so that we don't do something, forget the world for a second, we don't change ourselves, or we don't take the first step. To make it so big and make ourselves feel so small so that it's so daunting, it's so impossible, so we don't even start. That comes completely from the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, whose agenda it is to stop us from doing something positive. Here's the question. When it comes to humility, so-called humility, what's the end game? If it's encouraging you to do something positive, then it's good humility. If it's discouraging you from doing something positive, if your humility, if the conclusion of that is, well, who am I, therefore I'm not going to bother doing the good thing, then we know it's coming from a negative place. It's all about the effect. So what's the bottom line as we begin? So we are in a very, very special time of year. We're in the most critical time of year when it comes to our own spiritual connection and our own spiritual development. And as we think about this time of year and we think about the steps that we can take, so let's fall onto the classic, when I say classic, tried and true, tried and tested, the Jewish path. Torah, tefillah, tzedakah, work on ourselves, work on our relationship with God, and work on our relationship with the other. And it's that third piece of it that is the challenge of our generation. It's absolutely the challenge of our generation. To love the other person unconditionally. Even when they give us maybe reasons to not love them, it's to love them anyway unconditionally. That's the challenge of our generation, and that's what we're exploring in our class. You know, I've been reading a book, and the reason why I've been reading it is because we're actually having the author of the book join us this Thursday night for a live conversation. The book is called The Choice, and it's a New York Times best-selling book written by Dr. Edith Eger. She's a Holocaust survivor, a clinical psychologist, and an author. And reading her memoir, reading this book, it brings up so many feelings and so many emotions, and one of the most obvious and strongest feelings is how could even one person intentionally harm others to such a degree? How could people be part of or even allow such horrific acts on individuals? You see, I think sometimes the horrors get lost when we have magnified numbers. When you talk about 6 million or whatever it is, talk about big numbers, it becomes almost too big to process. But then you read one story with one person, and it becomes a real thing. Yeah? Instead of being a number, instead of being like a subject, a thing, the Holocaust, it's a person's story. I had the privilege, about a year and a half ago? When did your mother come to Atlanta? David Lizanne. Is that about a year and a half ago? David Lizanne's mother is a survivor who has an incredible story. And she shared her story in Atlanta. I had the privilege of going to hear it. So when you hear the stories, when you hear the individual stories, that it becomes, you hear the living testimony, witness testimony, living testimony, edut. So when you hear that everything comes into full focus. And you think about how does it happen that people could destroy other people, could harm other people. And you realize that it's not the first time it happened, and it wasn't the last time that it happened. And like many have said, the human capacity is such that the greatest harm, God forbid, can be perpetrated by one person to another person. The greatest challenge of our generation, the greatest challenge of all the generations, I believe, has been always, can we get along? Can we get along? The first generation of humanity, they ate from the tree. Second generation, one brother killed another brother. So which is worse? I would posit that the second generation was worse than the first generation. Adam and Eve turned against God, and what did they do? They ate from the tree of knowledge. Okay, they shouldn't have. And for that they got expelled from the garden. Okay, that wasn't good. But what happens the next generation? Even worse, what happens the next generation is that one brother, Cain, turns on his brother, his own brother, flesh and blood, and kills him because he was upset that his sacrifice was accepted and his own wasn't. And that starts the story of humanity. And from there we have continuously this idea of siblings in a rivalry. Whether it's Cain and Abel, whether it's Isaac and Ishmael, whether it's Jacob and Esau, whether it's the 10 brothers and Joseph, it's consistently, there's consistent fighting within families. And we're all one family. The message of the Torah is, this is not the way. This is not the solution. It's not the way. This is not the way to heal the world. To heal the world means to heal our relationships. So this is all by way of introduction. Now, let's go into our topic. Our topic today is spiritual calligraphy. That's the email that I sent out, and that's the topic we're going to cover right now. Spiritual, and it's going to connect back with this introduction. Spiritual calligraphy, if you've ever seen Hebrew, so you know that it's a very, I'm going to use a word, I'm going to mix a metaphor here. It's a very poetic language in writing. It's very beautiful, and it has a lot of character, all puns intended, right? There are 22 characters actually, but there's a lot of character in the language. And every letter has a meaning. Not like other languages, for example, English, our characters don't really have much meaning. If somebody were to ask their teacher in first grade, if a student were to raise, oh, we have a first grader right here. All right, hold on one second. We actually have a live first grader. His name is Eli Sollish. Okay, Eli will be our resident first grader. Eli, say hi, or not, or just be. That's also good. So imagine if Eli, who actually, Kanahara, Lianhara, Eli actually reads very nicely, so he knows the letters. But imagine if he wanted to go a little bit deeper. And so imagine if he raised his hand in class, and he said to his teacher, can you explain why the letter A looks the way it does? Why does it look like a capital letter A? Why does it look like maybe like a teepee, like a tent thing with a support, like a crossbar going through through the middle? Yeah? What would the teacher say? What would the teacher say? You got me. No idea. Eli, you can try that. Stump the teacher then. Yeah. Why does the letter B, capital letter B, look like a line with two bumps from the side? Why is the letter C a half a circle or whatever it is? Why is the letter D like that? E? Why? Why does it look like that? There's no answer. And in truth, the teacher would say it's, well, maybe wouldn't say this to the student, but in truth, one could argue it's not even a good question. There's no answer, but it's not a good question. Why? Because it doesn't have to mean something, right? It doesn't have to mean anything. Oh, look, Ellie's back. Look at you. Hey. Say hi.
Hi.
There you go. Done. All right. Good. Enjoy, my friend. Okay. It's not a valid question, one could argue. Why is it not a valid question? Because who said it has to mean something? Who said the letter A has to, the appearance, the shape has to mean something? Or the letter B or the letter C or the letter D? Who says it has to mean something? The assumption is faulty. It doesn't mean anything. It's a stand-in that represents something, but not because it actually means it. Just it signifies. It tells you when you encounter this letter, you read it this way, or it means this, but it's not that it actually has that meaning, not that it actually has that significance, but it's just that's the way it goes. Hebrew is very different. Hebrew, as many, if not all of you know by now, based on these classes that we've done or other classes that you've taken or other explorations that you've done, Hebrew is the ultimate of precision. Every aspect of Hebrew, of the letters, every aspect is significant. The name of the letter, the shape of the letter, the meaning of the letter, the numerology of the letter, every single aspect of a Hebrew letter is profoundly significant. And you do ask the question, so why does the Aleph look like an Aleph? This is a book that I love. It's called Letters of Light. If you want to know more about Hebrew letters, this is a great book. written by Rabbi Ari Raskin, Letters of Light. I also love how the cover almost seems to glow. Do you know, is that coming through, how the cover almost looks like it glows? They did a pretty good job. I look at it, and it's like hard to look at, and it's weird because it's not battery powered, right? Isn't that weird? It's like, it's bright. So I did a course a few years ago based on this book. We did a 4-part series called Letters of Light, and we went through it. And I think some of you with me here today actually took it. But for example, like look at the letter Ches. See that? That's how the letter Ches is written, the 8th letter. That's how the letter Ches is written in the Torah. Now, that's not how you're going to see it, in a font on your computer or whatever. But this is how, in the Torah, how it's written. It's actually written as 2 letters, a Vav and a Zayin, connected with, can you see that little connection there at the top? Yeah? It's like a Vav and a Zayin with a little roof connecting it. If I was doing a course on this, if I was redoing this course, then we could jump into each letter. It would take several weeks, but we could cover the topic. We don't right now, just given the constraints of this class, of this context. I'm not going to get into the specificities of the individual letters on that level, but know this: every letter and its shape is highly significant and it's highly precise. The letters, as we know, are the divine code of creation. God created via speech, through language. God created through characters. God said, Yihi ar, let there be light, Vayihi ar, and there was light. God said, Yihi rakia, let there be a heaven, a firmament, and there was. As the Arizal, the great Rabbi Isaac Luria says, the Hebrew letters that create the word Even, that form the word Even, which means stone, are actually the life force. The letters themselves, imbued by spiritual by God's powers, the letters themselves are transmitters of the energy that sustain a stone. So even though a stone is not considered to be an animate object, it's not animated, a stone, right, doesn't grow, doesn't move, unless gravity, but on its own doesn't move, doesn't grow, at least to the naked eye, right? We don't see it as a live creature. According to Kabbalah, it's absolutely alive, and it absolutely has a soul. And what type of soul? A stone soul, right? It's a stone. There's a whole genre in music that's named after this Kabbalistic understanding. Rock and soul. No, not at all. That's the wrong. Anyway, rock and roll, soul. All right, that was a little bit. It didn't work out. Anyway, the point is like this: that stones, rocks, actually have a soul. They have a neshama, they have a nefesh, they have a soul. And the soul is intimated. It's designed, if you will, by the letters. Aleph, Bet, Nun. So the letter Aleph is highly significant, as is Bet, etc., as all the letters. The shape is significant. You have a Yud on top, a Yud on the bottom, a Vav in the middle, right? You have a small, it's a large letter right here, but relatively small letter Yud here, small letter Yud there, and a Vav diagonal connecting the two. Tomorrow night in our numerology course, lesson 2, I'm going to explain the numerology behind the Aleph. How on a numerological level, when you break it down with its shape, combining shape and numerology, you actually end up with the number 26, which is the same numerology as God's 4-letter name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name that's used throughout the Torah to signify God's transcendence. The point is that the shape of a letter is highly significant. It's the code of creation, and it tells us the energy, the type of energy that's flowing to that thing. If you and I, doesn't have to be or, if you and I had the ability to see, to understand, to perceive the energy of the letters, then you and I would know something based on its name, based on its Hebrew name. Which is why the Talmud says that there were great sages, great scholars, who would ask a person their name, and when they told them their name, they would tell them about them. They would say, okay, so I got you figured out already. Based on your name, I understand, I can tap into your energy. What about two people that have the same name? It's a good question. But there's variances, obviously. But there's a general energy that's carried, it's transmitted by Hebrew letters. So the shape of a letter is highly significant when it comes to Hebrew as opposed to other languages. No one would say that the A, the B, the C, the D have a significance. I've never heard that. I've never heard such a thing, and I don't believe that to be the case. For that matter, there's no significance to why a cat is spelled C-A-T, why the animal that we know as cat in English, why that is called cat, or why a dog is called a dog, or why a bird is called a bird, or whatever it is. There's no significance necessarily in the name itself, why that thing is called that thing. But in Hebrew, the letters are significant. This is something that we've explored before in Kabbalah Coffee. We explored a text, Shara Yicha Ve'emunah, which is about the secrets of creation, and it deals extensively with the letters of creation. I'm trying to remember the name of that course. We have all the audio up on our podcast, SoundCloud, and iTunes. We taught it about a year and a half ago. Whatever, I forget the name of the series that we did. It was a long series covering the 12 chapters of that text. The bottom line is there's significance to every single letter, to every single word, and it connects to that thing itself. So today, what we're going, so getting back to spiritual calligraphy. So when it comes to writing a Hebrew letter, the laws are very precise, especially when you're writing it in a Torah scroll, for example. A scribe has to study for many years to be qualified to write a Torah scroll, or to write a mezuzah scroll, or to write a tefillin scroll, or scrolls of the tefillin, of the phylacteries. So to be somebody who can write these holy items by hand requires a lot of training, and requires a lot of precision. So one of my grandfather is a scribe. He doesn't write. He's some of you have met him before. He's visited Atlanta before. And may he be well and healthy and live many, 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 many long years. So my grandfather checks a little bit. He checks to ascertain the kashrut of tefillin mezuzot. He doesn't write at this point, but he wrote, and it takes many years of practice. He told me that he got into it because he was always very artistic, and he loved calligraphy, and so he figured, why not combine the passion of art and calligraphy, and drawing, with a spiritual, with a holy task, with holy work. Why not? It's a wonderful marriage. It's a wonderful connection. Speaking of marriage, also back in the day, in his heyday, he would write custom ketubot. You ever see those? The beautiful artistic, easier to say in the singular, not the plural, ketubah or ksuba, the marriage document, the Jewish marriage document. So that's an ancient Aramaic text that goes back a few thousand years, that's used as the marriage contract, so to speak, or the marriage document for a Jewish wedding. And there's a text, Hebrew, it's Aramaic, but it's written with Hebrew letters. And so some people have design. There's nowadays you could buy it's all, not all, but it's primarily typeset. You just, whatever, there are websites you can do it. You can do it on your own. You just have the typography and you just get that done. But not that long ago, it was all written by hand, and that's it. So my grandfather, I remember as a kid, he was always working on these large, really large. I'm talking about like probably 24 by 36, like very big, like poster size, ketubot, artwork, straight up artwork with, I'm talking about like scenes of like a chuppah with birds and flowers and like vines and down the side and like gorgeous stuff. He was able to express his artistic passion and the calligraphy with the Hebrew writing and everything, gorgeous. I mention this because the Hebrew, especially the Torah, the letters of the Torah, the Hebrew is meant to carry an energy. They're not just random characters that tell us something. The letters themselves, the shape of the letters are written with precision, which is why in the laws of Safrut, the Jewish scribal law, You have to draw the letter or write the letter in a certain way. You have to start somewhere and finish somewhere else. You can't draw backwards. You know, when you learn penmanship in any language, they tell you how to write. Yeah, you start here. Yeah, A. You start bottom left corner. Bottom left corner. You go up and down, and then left to right. What if I want to go the other way? Is it a crime? Oh, that's a treif out. That's a treif A. That doesn't work. It's a non-kosher A. You wrote it backwards. What do you mean? If I want to start my E, the lowercase e, so at least the way we learn, is you start in the middle, you go right, you go to the side, and then you loop around the azai, like that. Right? What if I want to start the loop and then go to the middle? Oh, invalid. Can't read it. Not kosher. Not kosher. It's an E. It's an E. In Hebrew, it's different. In the laws of Safrut, I'm not saying you want to write a letter to someone in Hebrew, knock yourself out. Write it however you want. But I'm talking about the biblical, like to write a Torah scroll, to write a mezuzah scroll, to write a tefillin scroll. You want to write a holy item, you have to write it. The letter has to be written in the precise way. You have to start at the starting point and at the end point and get the middle right as well. Every letter has to be written precisely because it's a flow of energy. It's not just a letter. It's not like a Machiavellian thing. The ends justify the means. However you got there is fine as long as you got there. No, because the letter itself is a flow of energy. The aleph is a flow. It's written in a flow. The bet is a flow. The gimel is a flow. It means something. As you draw the letter, the energy is summoned forth. It's a mystical experience. Every letter, I think I mentioned this recently, every letter in the Torah has to have white space around it. Without the white space, it's invalid. If two letters are touching each other, invalid. It's not good. I know I showed you the letter Ches before, and it's comprised of two letters touching each other. But that's how you make the letter. That's not two letters. That's one letter, but the way it's written, it's like the aleph, right? 3 letters, Yod, Yod, Vav. But that's the letter. That's one letter. What I'm talking about is if you have an aleph and a ches, ach, which means brother, right? Ach, aleph and ches, those 2 letters can't touch each other in the Torah scroll or tefillah mezuzah. If they do, it's not kosher. You have to have, oh, nice, coming in for a hug. You have to have space, white space around the letters. Why? Because every letter has an energy. And if you connect the letters, then you're mixing energies, and then you've lost it. You've lost the energy. You don't have, that's so nice. You don't have a single energy anymore. You have a confluence. Now, you do combine energies in a single word when you put the letters in proximity to each other. But you don't mix the letters to touch each other, because at that point, you don't have any defined letter. You have a mishmash of energies, and not, you have to have energy, combine it together, then you get something magical. But otherwise, it destroys, it abrogates the boundaries of, it demolishes, it violates the boundaries of the letter's energies. So this is a little bit about spiritual calligraphy. So in Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, the holy language, the holy tongue, the language of creation, the code of creation. So penmanship or calligraphy is not just an art, but as I wrote in the email, it's art which is design, which is really engineering, because the world is built, the universe, everything in existence is actually built on these letters, or built by these letters, in the precise sequence, in the precise code. In fact, as I mentioned before in Kabbalah Coffee, the Kabbalists say that the entire Torah is a code. So don't break it up even by the word breaks. If you put it as one long code, that's your code of creation. There might be another way to split it up even, that speaks better to that code, but it's all code, it's all names of God, it's all code. So imagine if you were looking at computer code. And imagine if computer code also had a meaning on the surface. Right? Imagine that. Imagine if the computer code also had a meaning on the surface. Like instead of random string of characters, if you and I could somehow make sense of a meaning of the characters. So you would have a dual reality. You would have the surface meaning of the characters and words, and then you would have the fact that it's code that's designing and creating something. And that's what you have with Torah. The letters themselves mean something on the outside. So we have stories. Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, Abram and Sarah, Moses, Pharaoh, Egypt, Exodus. Wonderful stories on the outside. Inside, code of creation. It's the design of everything. It's the architecture of life. It's the code of creation. So the calligraphy, the writing of the Hebrew letters in a Torah scroll, is actually drawing the code of creation. It's not just artistic, it's precise. It's art meets design, meets engineering, manufacturing. It's actually creating, which is why, by the way, one of the reasons why a Torah scroll cannot be printed. You're not allowed to print the Torah scroll. Imagine how much easier it would be if you could just print it off. Done. Everything has to be written by hand. One of the greatest, one of the big challenges nowadays is that people sell, whether they know better or not, they sell tefillin and mezuzot. It's hard to pull off a Torah scroll that's not legit because it's a more complicated thing. It's on a bigger scale, but tefillin and mezuzot oftentimes are sold when they've been printed, and that's not kosher, especially mezuzot. I can't tell you how many times I've seen. Like I told you, my grandfather checked mezuzot. I've seen countless cases where somebody brings in a mezuzah to be checked. You take it out of the case, because the scroll is what the case is. Nice, it's decorative, but that's not what it's about. It's about the scroll inside. Remind me to tell you the joke. I'll tell you the joke soon. Joke number 53, but I'll tell it soon. I'll tell you the joke about the number jokes. I have 2 jokes now lined up. I'll tell you them in a second. But how many times have I seen a scroll being opened? And even myself, people bring me scrolls. And I usually send it off to a local scribe to check. Somebody that's trained to know exactly what to look for. But I can tell right away when I open it up if it's paper and it's printed. I mean, you can see. And that's not kosher. Because a computer and a printer can't draw down an energy. It's not possible. It's not possible. There's no intention. There's no mindfulness. It just can't be. It's not shaykh. It's not. Until we get to artificial intelligence, until the robots control us, if that happens, then we can have another conversation. But right now, the computer and the printer are not drawing down the energy, the code. It's not happening. It's only happening when you draw it in the precise way. So, this is why, one of the reasons why, there are many reasons why, but one of the reasons why a mezuzah that's not handwritten on the right paper, on the right parchment, with the right color ink, with the right formula, it's just not kosher. And again, it's one of the big, I think it's one of the big, I'm trying to find the right word for it. It's like a swindle. I mean, I'm just calling it straight up a swindle. It's like it's cheating. For somebody to sell a mezuzah to a customer who thinks they're buying a kosher mezuzah, and it's a printed fabrication, it's such a chutzpah, it's such an avla, it's like such a, I don't even know an English word for it. It's a travesty. It's not right. I mean, it's really not right. It's not kosher. A kosher mezuzah is not even that. It's not even that costly. It's not even that. But kosher is kosher. Not kosher is just not kosher. It's like not the real deal. It's like an artificial. It's like an artificial thing. It's like real. What are like fancy designer shoes? Trying to think of somebody unmute yourself.
Louboutins or Jimmy Choo.
Louboutin, Jimmy Choo's. Oh, let's go Jimmy Choo. It's like Jimmy. You see how well versed I am. So it's like a real Jimmy Choo or the knockoff. Now the knockoff, although maybe it's not a good example, huh? Maybe,
knockoff.
yeah, that's a knockoff. So maybe that's not a good example as I'm processing my own example. Maybe it's not good because maybe somebody would say, you know what? I don't mind having not the real thing because it looks the same and that's it. It's much less expensive. When it comes to a mezuzah, though, nothing happens. There's no energy in it. It's just a piece of paper. That's all it is. The energy is drawn through the calligraphy. Today's class is about spiritual calligraphy. The magic happens when we summon forth the energy through the process of articulating the letter by hand. That's what makes the magic. That's what draws down, both drawing the letter, but also drawing down, summoning forth the energy into this world, into that space, into that item that happens when it's hand drawn. You can't replicate that. You can't duplicate that. You can't mass manufacture that. Some things just don't work on scale like that and through these artificial means. Just can't. Another, by the way, just a related topic, but not exactly calligraphy. Talking about hand things. Judaism is always about handmade stuff. Handcrafted. Very much about the intent that went into it. Informs that thing that was created by it. Judaism is very much about energy. Very much about spirituality. Very much about connection. And the connection happens with the human touch. With that experience that went into it. So, like for example, I was just going to say that. Donna. Okay, so Donna, who's with us, Donna is, if you see Donna, so her name is Jolie. Don't be fooled by the name on the computer. Donna.
It means French. It means pretty in French. I lived in France.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go. So Donna is leading a workshop in a few weeks that we're calling Kabbalah and Gemstones, where if you sign up, you'll get a kit of 108 gemstones, and Donna's going to lead the workshop. I'll lead the Kabbalah part, and Donna will lead the other part, the jewelry making part, and the significance behind the jewelry. And we're going to be doing it based on your own assessment of your own character, and etc. There's a bunch of different components to it, but essentially you're going to be touching the gemstones and creating jewelry, which is a beautiful hands-on experience. And there's a certain energy that you bring to it, right? That you will bring to it that is not going to happen when it's produced on a mass scale, or even when somebody else does it. Now, when it comes to Torah, a Torah scroll, a mezuzah and tefillin, so not everyone's going to be a scribe and be able to write it themselves. But as long as it's handwritten, it means that somebody imbued into it a sense of energy, a sense of intentionality, etc. So the related topic that I was about to mention was the topic of matzah. So on Passover, we eat matzah, that flat bread. You could buy machine-made matzah, right? The Manischewitz stuff that comes, the square matzah, the machine-made. Or you can get the handmade round shmura matzah. So, yeah, there's the machine-made matzah is easier to find and it's easier on the wallet. But at the same time, matzah is meant to be food of faith and food of healing. It's meant to carry an energy, and it does carry an energy. And the energy, it's hard for a machine on a production line to carry for that energy, which is why we seek to have, at least for the first Seder, at least one or two or three, whatever, at least a few matzahs that are of the handmade varietal, even if it's a little bit a little bit more complicated to get a hold of or to eat or to chew, whatever. Nonetheless, it has the energy. So, getting back to this idea, Judaism is all about the intentionality. It's all about the energy. It's about a craft experience. It's about the calligraphy. The Hebrew letters is about writing it out and articulating that shape. And so today, as we turn inside to our Kabbalistic text, today we're going to explore two letters. The letter Yud and the letter He, which in Kabbalah correspond to the energy of Chachma and Bina. And we're going to learn some secrets of the shapes of the Yud and the He, the calligraphy, the spiritual calligraphy of Yud and He, and how it relates to Chachma and Bina, and what it means for the way that I started this class, what it means for us and our relationships with others, and our tolerance and our love of others. So let's jump back into our topic of Chachma and Bina. So to quickly reset. So what is Chachma and what is Bina? Chachma is creative intelligence, but it's also the it's creative intelligence, but it's also somewhat of that abstract idea. It's not yet defined 100%. It's not yet solidified. It's certainly not broken down and divided into different pieces. It's like the core idea. It's like the full rush of that creative idea. Bina, on the other hand, is a very specific articulation of an idea, broken down, methodically organized, right? Broken down to all its pieces and expanded and fleshed out. So we have the nucleus of an idea, like the core, the nakuda, the point of the idea, and then you have its expansion. Over the last several weeks, probably 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks even, we've been, the major idea that we've been presenting is that these two powers, although they work in tandem, are in truth very different and in fact opposite from each other. So the abstract chachma is very different than the concrete bina. One is abstract, one is concrete, one is single, one is divided. In other words, one is a single point, one is divided into different pieces. Very different. They come from different sources. We explain the sources on a mystical level. But the real chiddush is, the real novelty is, the real mind-blowing thing is that despite their differences, they still work together. Chachma cooks an idea until it's ready to be fully fleshed out in bina. Cook is the wrong word, because cooking really is more of the bina thing. But chachma gets the core idea to a place where it's ready to hand it off to the next part of the process, ready to hand it off to bina. So chachma, we're going to see today, has 3 parts. The realm of chachma, or the power of chachma, actually has 3 different elements. But once chachma is done, an idea, a core idea, is ready to be handed off to bina, to be analyzed, broken down, fleshed out, and worked with. Chachma is prepping for bina. Bina, on the other hand, once you flesh out everything, then you come back to what's the point, right? You ask yourself, what's the point? After all is said and done, what's the bottom line? When a person's mind naturally, after all of the fleshing out of bina, when a person's mind naturally and intuitively says, so let's sum it up, let's create a summary, that's bina acknowledging and honoring chachma. That's bina, which is all about expansion, right? Blowing something out, right? Making it big. That's bina respecting chachma and saying, you know what? Let's go back to the core. What's the point of it all? How do we start this? Where are we headed? What's the destination? What's the goal? And how does that reflect where we started from the beginning? Which means that chachma has a little bit of bina in it, and bina has a little bit of chachma in it, because although they're very different, there's still a crossover between the two. So what I'm going to do now is share with you my screen, and we're going to jump in to some brand new text inside our text. Let's jump in. Give me a moment. Choltzu. All right. If you have the book, you can open it up. If you don't have the book, I know I mentioned that only because some of you, after I mentioned the book, I know picked up the book. But for the benefit of everybody, I have here the text. Okay. Let me fast forward to where we're at. Let's go to 68 and see if that's correct. Yeah, close. Okay. We started this chapter last week. We didn't finish it. We're going to pick it up right now. So chapter 25 started off by saying that understanding the difference between chachma and bina and the fact that they work with each other, this can explain the 2 phrases. I'm resetting the discussion. The one phrase is havein b'chachma, which means bina, or understand within chachma, which is basically how bina is expressed within the power of chachma. And the second is chacham b'bina, which means that bina possesses chachma within it. So here we go. I think I'm just going to read through from the beginning, just because we'll get a running start, and then we'll conclude the chapter. We can now understand the meaning of Havein b'chachma, understand through wisdom, and Chacham b'bina, become wise through understanding. Havein b'chachma refers to the inclusion of bina within Chachma. Now, what does that do? That enables Chachma to develop a concept to the level of comprehension and understanding. As I said a moment ago, that helps, I use the word cook, but that helps like prep the abstract, still abstract concept of Chachma, that helps develop it, get it ready to the point where it can be developed by the power of Bina. So even though the essential nature of Chachma is bittul and non-expansion, right? It's not actually expanding within Chachma itself, hence it's still only a point. Nevertheless, it can be expanded and understood through Bina, and Chachma takes it to that place. Chachma helps deliver it to that place where it can then be developed with Bina, through Bina. Conversely, the other phrase, Chacham b'Bina, refers to the inclusion of Chachma within Bina. Even though the nature of Bina is amplification, it's blowing something out, it's expanding, involving a multitude of details and explanations, it nevertheless possesses the power of Chachma, which transforms Yesh into Ayin. Which means, essentially, the result of the entire process of logic and understanding is gathered into its single conclusive point of summarization, the Nekudas HaTamsis. Basically, that means that after all of the expansion, the mind itself says, okay, I need to crystallize it. What's the point? What's the conclusion? You have a paper, 70 pages long. Yeah, a report is done. You have a report, a company report, and you have pages and dozens of pages in this report. But there's always a recommendation at the end. So bottom line, we looked at the company, we analyzed the company. All of these ideas, no, and so what do you want me to do about it? Right? You hire a company to come in and analyze the business. And they analyze and they write a whole report. What's the bottom line? Give me the action step. What am I doing now? That is the Chachma in Bina. Where Bina, after all is said and done, and all of the details are analyzed, you come back to an akudah, you come back to a point. That's how Chachma influences Bina. This entails, and when you come to this point, this entails the negation of all individual details and explanations, and culminates in a grasping of the essential intellectual matter. The essence of the concept becomes a single point which became understood through the many details and explanations. So basically what he says is, in this text, is that the process of coming to a conclusion after the expansion of Bina means that for that moment you're pushing away all the details. You're saying, as long as I'm being bogged down with the details, I can't move forward. Right? What's your recommendation? What do you want me to do? So you gave me all the facts and all of the analysis. No. What do you want me to do? What's the bottom line? What am I changing? What am I doing? The bottom line is, when you come to the bottom line, you have to almost push away all of the details, because the details are overwhelming. They're suffocating. It's, what do they call it? It's the paralysis of analysis. You've analyzed it so much, you can't even move anymore because you're so bombarded by the details. If you want to move from after all of the analysis, after all of the Bina, if you want to move forward, you need to call upon a little bit of Chachma within your Bina. You need to call upon the power of clearing out the details and focusing on what's really essentially important, which is what Chachma was in the beginning. Chachma, the way it started, the idea started as a core point, and then you expanded it, and then you have to bring it back down to a point. Okay, whereas the point of Chachma represents the concept before it's analyzed, the point within Bina is a result of the analytical process, and this matter is discussed in other places. Now let's jump into the new territory. Now, take a look. This is now the spirituality, or the spiritual calligraphy. Now we're going to get to the letters. Oh, and before we do this, just know, Chachma equals Yud, Bina equals Hey. That's it. Chachma is signified by the letter Yud, which is the small letter. I'll just pull up a quick letter Yud, 1 second, because I have the book here. I'll just hold it up for the benefit of everybody here so that we're all on the same page. Yud. Okay? Chachma is Yud, that little letter. That little letter. Okay? And Bina is the letter Hey, which looks like this. Right? That's the letter Hey. Okay. So let's jump into the text. It has been previously mentioned that the Yud has two protrusions. This is very cool. In addition to the body of the letter itself. This is the Kabbalah of calligraphy. Two protrusions in addition to the body of the letter itself. And in case you're wondering, what are we talking about? Very simple. Too many flaps going on here. Okay? Take a look. There's a top protrusion. Don't worry about that bottom one. We're not focusing on that. There's the top protrusion. And then, there's as you draw it, it comes to a point at the bottom. So you have the top, where it starts, and the bottom where it ends, and both are a point. And then you have the body of the Yud in the middle. Now the body is still like a dot. It still looks very small relatively, but it's the body. Okay? So, what does this represent? What do these three dimensions represent? The top point, the bottom point, and the body in the middle. So he says, the lower protrusion, which again is the bottom of the Yud right there, the bottom of the Yud, the lower protrusion represents Havein b'chachma, the tendency of Chachma towards Bina. So the power that Chachma has, as we said a moment ago, to hand off an idea to Bina for analysis. Chachma cooks it enough, not fully, right, not fleshed out, but Chachma develops, it's the wrong word because Bina develops, but within itself, it gets it ready for the development of Bina, for that handoff. What signifies that readiness within Chachma to deliver it somewhere else? The bottom point. That's where it hands it off. Generally speaking, the three levels of the Yud, refer to the levels of Keter, Chachma, and Bina, insofar as they exist within Chachma. This is so beautiful. Keser, Chachma, Keser, either way. Keser, Chachma, and Bina are three different levels, but he says they all exist within Chachma as well. In other words, Keser is above Chachma. Keser is the crown. The crown is above the head. Bina is Bina, after Chachma, and Chachma is Chachma. So these are three different dimensions. But what his big idea is that Chachma possesses both elements of what's above it and what is below it. In other words, a thing itself has a relationship to what came before it and to what will come after it. Think about a human being, right? You are you. You are your own human being. But do you have a connection with your past, with who came before you? Do you have a connection with your parents? Of course. Do you have a connection with what comes after you? Yes, of course. There's a connection with before and a connection with after. Even as you are who you are, there's still a connection in both directions. And so that's why we have three levels of the Yud, or three parts to the Yud that reference the three levels of Keter, Chachma, and Bina as they exist within Chachma. Here we go. The upper protrusion of the Yud, remember, the top of the Yud, top point of the Yud, represents the Keser, or the Keter of Chachma. This is the point without the form of a letter. It's still just a point. As mentioned previously, we said before, just to reset this and to remind you, so we said before that Chachma is that flash of insight that comes out of nowhere, that emerges out of nothingness. You didn't have an idea before, you didn't know it, you weren't thinking of it, suddenly you have it, and when you first get it, when you first get that aha moment, you can't even articulate what you have. You don't even know what you know. All you know is that you know something. All you know is that you got something. You have no idea what it is. That's the least articulated level of Chachma. That's like the abstract of the abstract. That's still like a notion that you have something without even knowing what you know. That's like an idea of the idea, but not the idea itself. So that's the top of the Yud. So Yud is Chachma. Yud is like the core of the idea, right? The creative idea that's not yet fleshed out. The top of it represents when it's even unknown to you. You don't even know what you got. You don't even know the creative idea. So if the Yud is the creative idea that's not yet fleshed out, the top part is the unknown of the creative idea. This is the point without the form of a letter, as I mentioned previously. Okay, let's continue. The body of the Yud, its breadth, in other words, the actual substance of the Yud, represents the level of Chachma within Chachma. And there's the Chachma of Chachma. It's weird because Chachma is Chachma, but Chachma has also what came before Second, what came and what's coming after, but also what it is, and the body of it is the body of the Yud. It's the point of Chachma as it can be contained within revealed intellect, at least in a defined form. So basically, let's talk about an idea again. So the top of the Yud is when you first have the feeling. It's not even you don't know it yet, but you sense in your mind. You sense that there's something creative that just happened. Something is stirring. You don't know what yet, but you feel it. It's a sense, it's a sensation. That's the top part of the Yud. Then it moves into a better, not understanding, but a better awareness of the creative idea. It's like, oh, I got this creative idea, and now it begins to take form, still a creative form, which is not yet defined in practical steps, still a creative form, but it's taken on some form. That's the body of the Yud. Okay, that's the Chachma of Chachma. Okay, the lower protrusion, so that's the middle, and what's the bottom of the Yud? That's the Bina of Chachma, which is the power to conduct the point of Chachma, to lead it to the expanded state of Bina through comprehension, understanding. So that's the part of it that develops it within Chachma to the point that it's ready to be fully developed and handed off within Bina. Okay, so the top part is undefined. The middle part is defined within Chachma, and the bottom part is the way it will be defined soon in Bina. So Chachma itself has 3 dimensions. Who would have thought? Chachma sounded like just one dimension. Chachma's Chachma. Not in Kabbalah. Chachma has 3 dimensions. 3 different levels. And it's all revealed by the calligraphy. That's the big idea here. It's all revealed by how you draw the letter. If you don't draw it correctly, then it's not just, I almost got it right. You haven't formed the concept. In other words, the shape is representing the shape of an idea. And if you haven't shaped the letter, then it means that the idea is also not shaped. It's a half-baked idea. No, it's not an idea that's fully formed. It's not a chachma that's fully articulated. So the writing, the calligraphy, brings out the concept. There's a powerful footnote that we're going to skip right now. Maybe we'll get back to it in a moment. But I want to continue to the next page. Now, this is in parentheses. Now, when something's in parentheses, and it begins with, it could be argued, this is a tentative form of writing. This is a non-conclusive form, right? If somebody says, it could be argued, and they write that in parentheses, it means that it's a bit of a hesitant or tentative offering. It's like, perhaps we could say, instead of saying, well, this is what it is, like, we weren't hesitant before about the Yud. So Yud has 3 parts, top, middle, and bottom, and it reflects the Keter, the Chachma, the Bina. Yeah, for sure. You want to say hi to everybody? Okay, fine. Riva is not ready to say hi yet. Okay, it's fine. So he said that straight up. Here he's saying in a more hesitant or tentative way. But if it's printed, then you and I can say it with confidence, even though it originally came in the form of a perhaps. But you and I, once a mystic printed it, once it's been published, now we know it's for sure truth. So take a look at what it says here. It could be argued that Chacham B'Bina, which is the Chachma within Bina, is represented, this is unbelievable, by the Yud, which forms the left leg of the letter Hey. I'm going to show you what this looks like in a second. This represents perhaps the point of the summarization which follows one's understanding in length and breadth, represented by the vertical and horizontal lines of the right side of the Hey. It's shocking how beautiful this is. It's so gorgeous. Take a look at the Hey. You see that Hey? That's the way the letter Hey is written. And if you look at it, it's got, you start here, right? You move this way and that way. It's got shape. It's got length. It's got height, whatever, length, breadth, whatever you want to call it. And then the last thing you do when you write the Hey, you put a little foot, a a little point over here. He says, you know what that is? That's a yud. And you know why it's a yud? Because in the intellectual process, so you started off with a point, but then you expanded it, but at the end of all the expansion, what do you do again? You summarize it. What's the bottom line? Remember we said before, Chacham bebina means that within Bina you also have the power of summarization. That's articulated with this shape. So every time you write a letter Hey, big motions all the way across, all the way down, and then one more little point. And that follows, that reflects the shape of the mind, the shape of the power of intelligence that we have. That we take an idea, we expand it, we break it down, we break it out, we blow it out, we cook it, we develop it, we get all the details in place, and then we inevitably think to ourselves, no, what's the bottom line, what's the point? The mind itself says, after all of it, give me the point. You know what this is like? To me, it's like an artist. You have a vision, and you can draw it, you can paint it in so many different ways. Right? So the vision is the chachma. That's the yud, that's the first yud. The vision itself started off, you didn't even know the vision, that's the point at the top. Then you developed it, then you had more clarity in the vision, and then you handed it off to Bina. Bina is already where you're thinking, okay, so this is, I know generally what I want to convey, but what am I actually going to paint? Like, what am I actually going to do? What am I going to use? What colors? What style? All of those details are broken down. And then at the end of everything, maybe it doesn't work exactly like this in the process, but work with me on this example. At the end of everything, what does the artist do? After all the details are put down on the canvas, the artist gives a title, gives a name to the piece of art. And that summarizes it once again. It started off as an idea, as a concept. Then it was fleshed out and developed and broken out. And then, once again, it comes back to a single point. What's the nekuda? What's the bottom line? What if I had to summarize this piece of art? What's the energy? What's the message? What's the meditation? What am I thinking about? What's the one point? There's only one point. There's so many points. What's the one point? Yeah, because after Bina comes Chachma. So what I'm saying is, we have this art in the Hey. We have the art in the Yud. These are not just random characters. It's not like a little thing with a thing. A B like that, a C, a D, an E. This is Hebrew, this is Lashon Kodesh, this is holy. And in the letters you see the Yud has a top point, a bottom point, a middle body. The Hey has length and breadth and a little Yud. Sorry, this, and a little Yud. And that Yud is the bottom line. Another possibility, back inside as we finish this chapter, another possibility, when one writes the Hey of the name Havaya, another possibility, when one writes the Hey of the name Havaya, one first writes a Yud. Oh, okay. He says, or the Yud, same point, but just two different things. Where's the Yud? Where's the summary within Bina? Either here or here at the top, which wouldn't work chronologically, but is another option. He says the way you make the Hey is you first start off by drawing a Yud, and then you just make it bigger. So you start off with the Yud, and then you expand it. But that doesn't come after the Hey, that comes before the Hey. All right, whatever. But here's another possibility. When one writes the Hey of the name Havaya, one first writes a Yud, and then extends it to form the roof of the letter. Right? That's what he's saying here. You first draw a Yud, because if you stopped it, imagine if you stopped it right there, that would kind of be a Yud. But then you extend it, and then you go down, and then you do this. So it is possible that this Yud represents Chacham B'Bina. Where do you see Chacham B'Bina? It could be the Yud that starts the top of the Hey. Who am I to pick favorites? But I like the first visualization where you have the expansion already, and then you have the little leg, the little Yud, the bottom corner, and it's like, that's like the signature. It's like the title. the art, and they have on the bottom or on the side, you have a little corner, right? That's how art is. You have the name. The Mona Lisa, whatever it is. Right? Now you have the Nakuda, the point once again. Look, I can't. I hope it's coming across how beautiful this is, and how beautiful Kabbalah is, and how beautiful design is, and how beautiful art is, and how beautiful the letters are, and calligraphy, and Hebrew, and Lashon Kodesh, and how beautiful our minds are. Right? Talk about a beautiful mind. This is all the mechanics. These are the mechanics of our mind. This is how we think. This is how we work. We have ideas and creative ideas that are very vague. And then we bake them. We develop them. We cook them. They get fully developed. And sometimes they become too big. And we have to summarize them again. That's the way the mind works. What's the point of it all? As I said last week and the week before, and as I started before today. What this tells us is that the letters are showing us how to get along. The letters are showing us how to get along. The Yud is not just a Yud. It's got a point on top to connect it with something above it. It's got a point below to connect it with something else. The Hey is not just a Hey. It has a Yud to connect it with Chachma. The letters themselves, the shapes, and each shape is significant. Each stroke of the calligraphy pen of the scribe, each pen stroke, each quill stroke is significant. And each stroke represents how a thing is connected to another thing. Nothing is self-contained. Nothing is an island unto itself. Simon and Garfunkel, I believe, wrote, I am a rock, I am an island. And a rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. And that might be true for rocks and islands, but you and I, our minds are not rocks, and they're not islands. Our minds work together in beautiful synchronicity. Our minds work together in beautiful harmony. Our chachma is chachma, not bina, but it works together with bina. Our bina is bina, not chachma, but it works together, and it has the inter-inclusion. It includes in the shape. The shape of the letter includes the other letter in it. It's mind-boggling how you have within one letter the shape of the other letter. It's crazy, right? That's not your letter, right? Stay in your lane. No, it has the other one. Why? Because of the power and the need, the necessity to include the other. Because to work, we have to work together. There's no such thing as working without working together. If Chachma and Bina were siloed, completely separate, we would never be able to think. We couldn't have. You would have abstract ideas. You would have big plans you have big things that are fleshed out, and nothing would make sense. Nothing would work, and nothing would get done. There would never be okay, I had an idea, fleshed it out, summarized it, and I'm able to move forward. You would never have that process. You would never have that clarity. There would be this paralysis. We would have ideas that are vague or ideas that are fleshed out. Nothing would work together. You and I work because we're able to work together in our own minds. We need to extend this, as I've said many times, and trust me, if you've already heard this, and you're like, well, I already heard this already. Listen, you're going to hear this every week. It doesn't matter. I'm not afraid to say this again and again and again, because this is our challenge. To work, we need to work together. This is true with the letters. It's true with the energies of creation. It's true with the powers of our mind. It's true with the limbs of our body. And it's true with human beings. To work, we need to work together. So this week, as we experience the energy shift away from the rest of the year, and we begin to enter into that energy of Chodesh Elul, the month of Elul, let us step up our inclusion game. Let us recognize the importance of connecting with others, the importance of appreciating the gift of the other. If you're Chachma and they're Bina, have a little bit of Bina in your Chachma. Recognize the importance of Bina in your Chachma. If you're Chachma, I forget which way I said it. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Whoever you are, right? Recognize the power of the other. Chachma loves Bina even though it's not Bina. Bina loves Chachma even though it's not Chachma. But to love is to appreciate, is to respect. let's respect ourselves, let's respect the other, and let's make the change. As we enter El, the great mystics would say when El comes, there's a change in the wind. There's a change in the atmosphere. You can feel it. If you're attuned to it, you can feel it. It's called a tshuva vant. It's a tshuva wind. A wind of correction. Tshuva means repentance, not repentance. It means, translated as repentance, but it means change. It means correction. It means transformation. This is now the time for transformation. Transformation sounds like a big word, but it starts with one step, one decision, one relationship, one moment, one phone call, one letter, one movement, one act can change everything. Thank you for joining me today for Kabbalah Coffee. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I hope you appreciated the beauty. I hope I did a good enough job of conveying the beauty of the Hebrew and the power of the letters, of the Yud and the Hey. And I hope that we're all inspired to make one more effort for connection, because we certainly know that is what we all need. All right, don't forget to join me. If you're not yet part of it, join me tomorrow night for the mystery of Hebrew numerology. Thursday night, we have Rosh Chodesh El. We have Dr. Edith Eger from California joining us. She's 92 years old. She is known as the ballerina of Auschwitz. She danced before the angel of death, or the doctor of death, Joseph Mengele himself. She writes about it in her book. It's shocking, just the stories. I mean, everyone had their story. Her story is she articulates it in a powerful way. And join me Thursday night for a historic event and hear testimony from a living witness, somebody who lived through it and has an inspiring message about how to overcome trauma and how to choose to be positive and happy despite the scars. That's Thursday, and otherwise, let's Torah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. Let's fill our own minds with wisdom. Let's connect with God in conversation, and let's help out the other person and connect with them. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you soon.
Beautiful
Thank
class.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you all. All right. Take care.